10 years after their rejection by the Galactic Council, humanity faced a situation they had never expected or even imagined. The Council was now asking to join them. The irony was not lost on anyone, especially Fleet Admiral Park Soo-young, as she stood in the newly constructed Commonwealth Assembly Hall on New Harmony, preparing to address representatives from both the Commonwealth and the Council for the first time in galactic history. The crisis that brought them together had begun 6 months earlier when something called the entropy plague swept through Council space. This was not a biological disease that affected living beings, but something far worse. It was a cascade failure in the fundamental forces that held matter together. At the atomic level, entire star systems simply stopped working according to the laws of physics. Planets lost their gravity and fell apart. Stars began burning in impossible colors or stopped burning altogether. Technology that had functioned perfectly for thousands of years suddenly failed without any explanation. Scientists watched in horror as the basic laws of reality became unreliable in affected regions. The Council's best scientists were completely baffled by what was happening. Their most advanced computers could not create models of the phenomenon. Their greatest minds could not even agree on whether they were facing a natural disaster or some kind of attack from forces beyond their understanding. The plague continued to spread, and nothing they tried could slow it down. Then Commonwealth researchers, led by Dr. Han Myung, made a breakthrough that changed everything. She worked with a team that included probability mathematicians from 3 different species beings who could calculate odds in ways that no single species could manage. Working together, they discovered that the entropy plague was not random at all. The plague was actually a reaction to something the Council had been doing for centuries without realizing the consequences. Dr. Han Myung explained to the emergency joint session. The Council has been imposing order on chaos for so long that reality itself is starting to break down. Their rigid hierarchies, their standardized technologies, their insistence on logical patterns has created a resonance effect that is destabilizing the quantum foundation of local space-time. The solution was as elegant as it was impossible for the Council to implement alone. The entropy plague could only be stopped by introducing controlled chaos back into the affected regions. Random variations, unpredictable patterns, and completely illogical solutions were needed to restore the natural balance between order and entropy that kept reality stable. This was exactly what the Commonwealth had been doing naturally for years without even realizing it. Every time they brought together incompatible species, every time they used unconventional solutions, every time they ignored established patterns, they were strengthening the fabric of reality itself. Captain Yoon Sung-ho led the first joint mission into a plague-affected zone. His ship carried the most diverse crew ever assembled in galactic history. Council scientists working alongside Commonwealth innovators, beings who thought in pure mathematical concepts, collaborating with others who operated entirely on intuition, species who had been enemies for centuries, now working toward a common goal of saving reality itself. The results exceeded everyone's most optimistic expectations. Not only did they stop the plague advance in the affected systems, they actually improved the areas they worked in. Stars began burning more efficiently, planets developed more stable climates, and even space travel became easier as the chaotic elements introduced beneficial variations in local physics. President Song Hai-won watched the success reports with mixed feelings of satisfaction and deep sadness. Humanity had proven their worth beyond any possible doubt, but the cost had been enormous. Billions of beings across dozens of species had suffered and died, while the Council rigid thinking prevented them from finding solutions that seemed obvious to Commonwealth minds. We could have prevented all of this, she told her. If Cabot during their daily briefing session, if they had accepted us 10 years ago, if they had been willing to learn from our dangerous unpredictability, as they called it, none of this disaster would have happened. Foreign Minister Lim Dae-young nodded grimly. The question now is what we do with a victory we never wanted. The Council is essentially asking us to save their entire civilization. How do we respond to that request? The answer came from an unexpected source. The Commonwealth's newest member species called themselves the Paradox Keepers, and they were beings who existed in multiple timelines simultaneously. They could perceive potential futures that others could not even imagine. Their representative spoke through a translation device that was painful to listen to. In all possible timelines where the Commonwealth dominates, the Council galactic civilization stagnates and dies within 1,000 years, the alien said. In all timelines where the Council dominates the Commonwealth, galactic civilization collapses within just a few centuries, but in timelines where both systems coexist and compete with each other, sapient species continue to grow and evolve for millions of years. This revelation led to the most complex negotiation in the history of the galaxy. The Commonwealth had the power to dictate any terms they wanted, but they chose instead to propose something that had never been tried before: a dual system where Council and Commonwealth coexisted as separate but interconnected civilizations. Ambassador Choi Min-woo spent months working out the details with his Council counterpart in sessions that sometimes lasted for days. The final agreement created overlapping spheres of influence rather than divided territories. Some species would remain purely Council members, others would be Commonwealth only, but many would hold dual citizenship and contribute to both systems. Trade would flow freely between both civilizations, with each contributing their natural strengths. The Council advanced manufacturing capabilities and established infrastructure would support the Commonwealth innovative research and rapid expansion programs. The Commonwealth diverse problem-solving approaches would help the Council adapt to challenges their rigid thinking could not handle. Most importantly, both systems would maintain their fundamental differences that made them successful. The Council would continue to value order, hierarchy, and logical progression in all things. The Commonwealth would continue to embrace chaos, diversity, and intuitive leaps of understanding. The tension between these completely different approaches would drive both civilizations to greater achievements than either could reach alone. The signing ceremony took place simultaneously on the Council capital world in new harmony with real-time communication linking both locations. Admiral Park Soo-young represented the Commonwealth while Grand Admiral Vextar spoke for the Council. The being who had once viewed humans as too dangerous to include, now publicly acknowledged them as essential partners for the future. 10 years ago we believed that stability required uniformity. Vextar admitted in his address to both civilizations. We thought that chaos was the enemy of all civilization. We believed that logic was always superior to intuition. We were completely wrong. Order without chaos becomes stagnation. Logic without intuition becomes blindness. Safety without risk becomes death. Park's response was characteristically human, practical, optimistic, and slightly irreverent. We told you from the beginning that we were unpredictable. You rejected us because you thought that was a dangerous weakness. It took the near collapse of galactic civilization for everyone to realize it was actually our greatest strength. The new galactic order was not perfect, and never would be. There were conflicts and misunderstandings and occasional serious crises as to very different approaches to civilization. Learned to work together, but for the first time in galactic history, the future was truly unpredictable, and that turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed to thrive. Humanity had been exiled for being too dangerous to include in the established order. They had responded by building something so successful that their former rejectors came asking to join them. In the end, they had achieved something greater than simple membership in the Galactic Council. They had fundamentally changed what galactic civilization could become, and the entire galaxy was better for it. 5 years after saving the Galactic Council from complete destruction, humanity had become something that had never existed before in the history of the galaxy. They had built a truly multi-species civilization that worked without any central government controlling everything. The human sphere had grown into the human Commonwealth, a loose alliance of colonies, allied alien species, and trading networks that now covered half the known galaxy. President Kim Hyojin of the planet New Terra received daily reports that would have seemed like fantasy stories just 10 years earlier. The Commonwealth now included over 200 different species, controlled more territory than any single Council member nation, and had developed technologies that made some Council advances look like primitive tools. The secret to human success was not superior weapons or advanced science, but their completely different approach to dealing with other species. While the Council maintained strict hierarchies based on how technologically advanced each species was, humans treated every species they met as potential partners who could contribute something valuable. Admiral Jo Manesio commanded the Commonwealth Defense Fleet from her flagship Incheon Rising. Her crew included beings that seemed impossible to work together, crystalline engineers whose silicon-based bodies could survive in the vacuum of space, methane breathers whose chemistry allowed them to process materials that would kill oxygen-based lifeforms, and quantum dancers who could perceive dimensions that other species could not even detect. The Council still does not understand what we have actually built, she explained to visiting diplomats from Earth. They see a military alliance or a trading empire. What we actually created is something completely new, a civilization based on using diversity as strength rather than seeking uniformity for safety. The Commonwealth capital New Harmony showed this philosophy in action. The system had been chosen because it contained multiple worlds that could be modified to support different forms of life. The gas giant Cloudhaven housed all the aerial species that lived in atmospheres. The ice world Frostholm supported the cryogenic life forms that needed extreme cold. The tidally locked planet Twilight provided perfect conditions for species that required very specific lighting. Dr. Bae Soo-jin, the Commonwealth lead scientist for studying alien life, had made her career by finding ways for completely incompatible species to work together successfully. The Council sees differences between species as problems that need to be managed and controlled, she explained. We see those same differences as solutions waiting to be discovered. Every new species we encounter brings capabilities that we never had before. This philosophy had practical benefits that amazed Council observers who studied Commonwealth operations. Their ships could operate in environments that would instantly destroy traditional vessels. Their mixed species crews could solve problems that would completely stump teams made up of just one species. Most importantly, their expansion was welcomed rather than feared because they improved conditions for everyone. They encountered Captain Na Young explored the most dangerous regions of the galaxy with crews that included species the Council had written off as extinct or hopeless. The Silicon Weavers were crystalline beings who had been dismissed as non-sentient because they thought in timescales of thousands of years rather than minutes, but they proved invaluable for understanding how stars and planets changed over long periods. The probability ghosts were energy beings who existed in quantum superposition, meaning they were in multiple states at the same time. The Council could not even communicate with them properly. But these beings could navigate space hazards that were completely invisible to conventional sensors. The Commonwealth's greatest achievement was not technological but cultural. They had solved the fundamental problem that had limited galactic civilization for thousands of years: how to maintain individual identity while building collective strength that benefited everyone. The Council operated on the principle that advanced species naturally dominated primitive ones. This created stable hierarchies but severely limited innovation. Because newer ideas were always rejected, the Commonwealth operated on the principle that every species had evolved unique solutions to universal problems. This created apparent chaos but generated constant breakthroughs and discoveries. Commander S. Yoteho discovered this principle during his exploration of the dangerous Spiral Nebula region. His mixed species crew encountered the Dream Weavers, a species that experienced reality through collective, unconscious sharing rather than individual awareness. Council first contact protocols would have classified them as a hive mind to be approached cautiously and contained carefully. Instead, the Commonwealth team recognized them as master psychologists who could resolve conflicts that had lasted for centuries. Within months, 3 long-standing territorial disputes in Commonwealth space were peacefully resolved using Dreamweaver mediation techniques that no one else had ever imagined. Economic implications were staggering to outside observers. Commonwealth trade networks operated on principles that seemed to violate basic economic laws instead of competing for limited resources. Member species specialized in areas where they had natural advantages, then freely shared their outputs with everyone else. Economic Coordinator Park One-Young tried to explain this to confused Council trade representatives. When the Crystal Singers can grow computing devices inside their own bodies, and the Void Swimmers can travel through dimensions we cannot perceive, and the Time Echoes can predict market changes by reading quantum probability flows, then traditional concepts of scarcity become meaningless. The result was abundance that Council resource management experts claimed was theoretically impossible. Commonwealth worlds did not compete for raw materials, because they transformed waste products from one species into essential resources for another. They did not fight over territory because they modified environments to support multiple different forms of life simultaneously. Most disturbing to Council observers was the Commonwealth approach to government. Instead of the careful bureaucracies that managed Council space, humans had created a system based entirely on voluntary cooperation, and mutual benefit decisions were made by consensus among all affected parties with different species contributing expertise in their specific areas of knowledge. Prime Minister Lee Ji-won of the Commonwealth Assembly often found herself mediating between beings whose very existence violated what the Council considered natural law. Democracy is complicated enough when everyone involved is the same species and breathes the same air, she noted. When your legislative session includes energy beings, hive minds, collective consciousnesses, and individuals who exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously, you learn to really appreciate the fine art of compromise. The Commonwealth had grown so large and successful that it could no longer be ignored by anyone. Some Council members had begun making quiet, diplomatic contacts, suggesting that perhaps the original rejection had been hasty and should be reconsidered. Others viewed the human expansion as an existential threat that needed to be contained before it destabilized the entire established galactic order. What none of the Council members understood was that the Commonwealth had already fundamentally changed the rules of how galactic civilization worked. The question was no longer whether humanity would be accepted into existing power the question was whether existing power structures could adapt to a reality where the species they had rejected had become more successful than anyone had ever imagined possible. The Commonwealth continued to grow every day, welcoming new species and developing new technologies and finding new solutions to problems that had seemed unsolvable. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was leading that change, whether the established powers wanted it or not. 3 years after the Galactic Council had rejected humanity, a new threat appeared from the dark, empty spaces between galaxies. The Void Reavers had returned. These were not living beings but machines built for one terrible purpose: to destroy all biological life in the universe. They had attacked the galaxy once before, thousands of years ago, and it had taken every species working together to drive them. A Wagrand Admiral Vexstar stood in the command center of the Council flagship, watching the tactical displays with growing fear. The mechanical ships of the Void Reavers moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. They had already destroyed 3 entire star systems, leaving nothing behind but empty space and cosmic dust. The Reavers were not like any enemy the Council had faced before. They did not negotiate or show mercy or even seem to understand that other forms of life had value. They simply arrived at a system, stripped it of all organic matter, and moved on to the next target. Their technology had advanced greatly since their last invasion, making them even more deadly than before. The Strategic Coordinator Ilmos reported the latest casualties, with his tentacles writhing in distress. Our defensive lines are barely holding, Admiral. Their new weapons cut through our shields like they are made of paper. We have lost 12 major fleets in the past month alone. The emergency session of the Council brought together representatives from all 47 member species. For the first time in their recorded history, they faced an enemy that could potentially wipe out their entire civilization. The traditional battle tactics that had served them for centuries were completely useless against the mechanical precision of the reverse. That was when an unexpected message reached Council Space. Captain Hansel appeared on their communication screens, looking older than when they had last seen him, but carrying himself with the confidence of someone whose people had thrived against impossible odds. Honorable Council members, he began, speaking with respect but not fear, we have detected the Void Reaver invasion. Despite our complicated history with your organization, we are offering our assistance in this fight. The council chamber erupted in heated debate. Some delegates were outraged that the rejected species would dare to offer help to their superiors. Others were curious about what capabilities humans might have developed during their exile. A few were desperate enough to accept help from anyone who offered it. Admiral Vextar finally restored order and addressed the human captain directly. Human Captain Hansel, our combined fleets are struggling to hold defensive positions against this enemy. What could your limited military forces possibly offer against foes that challenge our greatest warship? Hansel smiled, and there was something in that expression that was not entirely pleasant. Admiral, you rejected us 3 years ago because you said we were too dangerous and unpredictable. The Void Reavers follow perfect mechanical logic with calculated responses and predictable patterns. Maybe it is time to fight logic with complete chaos. Within hours, human fleets began arriving at the battle zones. The council observers were shocked by what they saw. Human ships looked like nothing in their military databases. The designs seemed to ignore basic engineering principles, with asymmetrical shapes and weapons that operated on theoretical physics. The council had not mastered. Even more surprising was the crews these ships carried, not just humans but dozens of different alien species working together. Many of these beings were refugees from council space, or representatives from species that the council had dismissed as worthless. The diversity was unlike anything the council had ever seen. Commander Park Ji-hoon led the first human task force into direct combat with the Reavers. His ship, the Soul Pride, carried a crew that included humans and 6 different non-council species working as a single unit. Their approach to fighting the mechanical enemy baffled both their allies and their foes. Instead of forming the traditional battle lines that military doctrine required, human ships attacked from completely unpredictable angles. They used suicide runs that no logical species would ever attempt. They feinted retreats that turned into devastating flanking attacks. They employed weapon combinations that should not have worked but somehow did. Dr. Kong Nuna, now serving as a strategic advisor, tried to explain to confused council observers why human tactics were so effective. The Reavers expect rational behavior from their enemies. They calculate optimal responses based on logical military thinking, but humans do not always follow logic. We take risks that others consider impossible. We innovate in the middle of battles, and we refuse to accept that anything cannot be defeated. The turning the point came when human forces introduced their most unconventional weapon, which was the other species fighting alongside them. The council had spent centuries maintaining careful hierarchies and strict territorial boundaries between different alien races. Humans had spent 3 years building alliances based on mutual benefit rather than political structure. Captain Lee Soyoung commanded a mixed fleet that included species the council had written off as hopeless. The insectoid hive warriors that the council dismissed as too primitive proved to have reflexes faster than any computer. The crystal-based shard singers, whose sonic weapons had been considered obsolete, could disrupt Reaver communication networks. The gaseous cloud dancers, who had been ignored because they could not survive on planets, could move through space in ways that confused mechanical targeting systems together. These diverse forces achieved what pure council fleets could not. They began pushing the Reaver back. The key breakthrough came when engineer Shin Dong-wook proposed something that violated every principle of safe military conduct. What if we do not try to destroy their ships, he asked. What if we try to capture them instead? The idea seemed completely insane. Void Reaver technology was so dangerous that even their broken pieces could kill anyone who touched them. But humans had made contact with a species the council had never encountered, the Echo Minds. These were beings of pure energy, who could interface directly with electronic systems. The combined human Echo Mind boarding parties achieved what everyone thought was impossible. They captured intact Reaver vessels and began turning the enemy technology against itself within weeks. The mechanical precision that had made the Reavers so deadly became their greatest weakness as captured ships fed false information back to their main fleets. War ended not with a massive final battle but with the gradual corruption of the Reaver command network. Their perfect logic became chaotic. Their coordinated attacks became confused, and their unstoppable advance became a panicked retreat back to the dark spaces. Between galaxies, Grand Admiral Vextar stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching human ships escort the last Reaver forces out of council space. Beside him, Captain Hansel waited quietly for the Admiral to speak. Pure tactics violated every principle of civilized warfare, the Admiral finally said. Hansel agreed without any shame. That is exactly why they worked against an enemy that understood civilized warfare perfectly. The council now faced a reality they had never imagined. The species they had rejected as too dangerous to include had saved their entire civilization using the very qualities they had feared most. Their unpredictability, their aggression, their refusal to follow established patterns had proven to be exactly what was needed when logic and order failed. The question now was what would happen next between the Council and the humans who had just saved them all. The news hit Earth like a bomb going off. Everyone on every continent heard about the rejection at the same time. Captain Hansel and his team had sent their report ahead using the fastest communication methods they had. People gathered around screens, in their homes and in public places, watching as the story spread across the world. President Lee Haijin sat in her office in the Capitol building looking out at the city below. She could see crowds of people in the streets. Some were angry and shouting. Others looked confused and scared. A few seemed to be celebrating, though she could not understand why anyone would be happy about this news. The emergency meeting of the United Earth Assembly was called for the next day. Representatives from every nation on Earth flew to the massive hall in Neosol. The building had been designed to hold important meetings, but nothing as important as this. The future of humanity itself was about to be decided. Choi Minho stood at the front of the room, facing hundreds of angry faces. He was the smartest person most of them had ever met, but even he looked nervous as he began to speak. The Galactic Council controls more than half of our local area of the galaxy, he said, in a voice that carried to every corner of the hall. They have technology that is hundreds of years ahead of anything we have built. The room erupted in angry voices. Some people shouted that humanity should build weapons and fight back. Others demanded that Earth send more diplomats to try again. A few suggested that maybe the aliens were right and humans should just accept their place and stay home. Minister Yang Sujin from the Earth Defense Force stood up and waited for quiet. Their warning was very clear, she said grimly. Any human ship found in their territory after 30 days will be destroyed. They have weapons that could turn our entire planet into glass from space. President Lee raised her hand and slowly the room became quiet. When she spoke, her voice was strong and clear and everyone could hear the determination in her words. The Galactic Council made a decision about humanity. They looked at our history and our nature and decided we were a threat that needed to be locked away rather than friends who could be welcomed. She paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of as many people as she could. They may have better technology than us, but they made one very big mistake. They do not understand what happens when someone tells humans they are not good enough. Within days, everything changed. The rejection that had seemed like the worst disaster in human history became something else entirely. It became a challenge that every person on Earth wanted to meet. The Global Space Initiative suddenly had more money than anyone had ever dreamed of. Every nation contributed everything they could spare. Dr. Park Sun-woo had been working on theories about faster space travel in a small laboratory with just a few assistants. Suddenly she found herself in charge of the biggest research project in human history. The best minds from every field of science came to work with her. Engineers and mathematicians and physicists and even artists and musicians, all working together to solve problems that had seemed impossible. The project they created was bigger than anything humans had ever tried before. If they could not join the galaxy that already existed, they would build their own. Operation New Horizon aimed to establish human colonies in parts of space that no one had explored yet. They would develop technologies that could compete with anything the Council had. They would make friends with alien species that the Council had ignored or rejected. Engineer Kim Jae-soon led the teams that built the new ships. These were not like the careful, slow vessels that humans had used before. They were fast and tough and designed to go anywhere in the galaxy. The Council thinks we are aggressive and unpredictable, he told his workers. Fine. We will build ships that show them exactly what they should fear about us. The first wave of colony ships launched just 6 months after the rejection. This was incredibly fast for such a big project, but humans worked day and night to make it happen. Unlike the slow, careful expansion that the Council expected, humans spread out in many directions at the same time. Captain Yu Dahai led her ship toward the Kepler system, where they had detected planets that could support human life. Commander Lim Tae-ho took his expedition to the Vega region, where there were asteroids full of valuable minerals that could be mined. Dr. Song Myung began the hard work of changing hostile planets into places where humans could live and breathe. What the Council had not expected was humanity's greatest strength, which was their ability to find many different solutions to the same problem. While alien species usually followed the same patterns and rules, human colonies developed wildly different approaches. Some focused on building strong military forces, others worked on creating new technologies. Still others concentrated on culture and trade and making friends. The Council began getting reports that confused their analysts. Human expansion was not following any pattern they could understand. Humans were not conquering territory in straight lines like a normal military force. They were not building traditional defensive walls around their space. Instead, they seemed to be appearing everywhere. At once, human ships were making contact with dozens of alien species that were not part of the Council. They offered trade agreements and technology exchanges and promises of mutual defense. Many of these species had been ignored by the Council for centuries because they were considered too primitive or too strange or too difficult to deal with. Within 2 years, the human sphere had grown from a single star system to a huge network of colonies and trading posts and allied species. The area they controlled was larger than the territory of some Council member nations. But unlike traditional empires, it was not controlled from one central location. Each human settlement operated independently while staying in communication with the others. The most troubling thing from the council point of view was how humans treated other species. Instead of the aggressive conquest they had predicted, humans showed remarkable ability to adapt and learn. They learned alien languages and adopted useful customs and formed real partnerships with beings very different from themselves. Species that had been rejected by the council or simply ignored found themselves welcomed as equals in human space. The insect-like hive warriors who the council thought were too primitive, the crystal-based shard singers whose technology seemed obsolete, the gaseous cloud dancers who could not live on solid planets. All of them found places in the growing human community. Commander Oh Sung-won now governed a thriving colony on the planet New Busan. He sent regular reports back to Earth describing the amazing progress they were making. The council was right about one thing, he wrote. We are unpredictable, but they completely missed the point. Our unpredictability is not just about war and fighting, it is about finding solutions that no one else thought of, making friends in unexpected places and turning every problem into an opportunity. The second anniversary of the rejection approached. Humanity had not only survived their exile but had begun to thrive in ways that made the Galactic Council very uncomfortable. The species they had dismissed as too dangerous to include had become too successful to ignore. The question was no longer whether humans deserved to join the galactic community. The question was whether the galactic community could survive the competition from the empire that the rejected humans had built. Captain Hansel walked through the long bright hallway toward the biggest room he had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow from inside, and everything felt huge compared to the small human ships he was used to. His boots made soft sounds on the smooth floor as he moved closer to what the aliens called the council chamber. Behind him walked three other humans who had been chosen to represent all of Earth. Dr. Kim Sora carried a bag full of papers and devices that showed all the amazing things humans had discovered about science and medicine. Engineer Park Dongmin had his tablet ready with pictures of human cities and inventions in music and art. Diplomat Lee Jun-ho practiced his speech one more time under his breath, even though they had all memorized it perfectly weeks ago. The four humans had spent 3 years traveling to this place in the center of the galaxy, where 47 different alien species made decisions for everyone. The journey had been long and dangerous, but finally they were here. Finally they would ask to join the great community of space traveling people that had existed for thousands of years. The council chamber was so big that Hansel could not see the far wall. Floating in the air were dozens of strange seats and platforms where the alien representatives sat. Some looked like giant insects with too many legs, others were made of metal and wires and sparks of electricity. Some looked like they were made of liquid that kept changing shape, and a few seemed to be just clouds of gas with lights inside them. Hansel had seen pictures, but being here in person made him feel very small. The humans had thought they were pretty smart when they finally figured out how to travel faster than light speed. They had been so proud when they built their first space stations and started exploring other planets, but looking at all these advanced aliens made them realize how much they still did not know. What the biggest alien floated in the center of the room. It had purple skin that glowed softly and 6 arms that moved like they were swimming through water. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once through some kind of technology that the humans could not understand. Welcome humans from the planet Earth in the Sol system, the alien said. Your request to join our council has been studied carefully. We have looked at your history, your science, your culture, and your felt his heart beating fast. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. Earth had sent its best people to make this request. They had shown the aliens everything good about humanity, the art and music that made people cry with beauty, the scientific discoveries that could help cure diseases, the stories and poems that showed how much humans cared about each other and all living things. We have made our decision, the purple alien continued, and Hansel smiled because he was sure it would be good news. The answer is no, your species is rejected. You cannot join our council and you cannot enter our pasta. Words hit Hansel like a punch in the stomach. Dr. Sora dropped her bag and all her papers scattered across the floor. Park Dongmin stared at his tablet like he could not understand what he was hearing. Lee Jun-ho opened his mouth but no words came out. But why? Hansel finally managed to say. We showed you our peaceful nature. We proved that we want to learn and grow and help others. What did we do wrong? 8 different alien answered. This one looked like a giant lizard with scales that changed colors as it talked. Your species fights wars among yourselves. You use up resources without thinking about the future. You show anger and violence toward others who are different from you. Another voice joined in from an alien that seemed to be made of shiny metal. Your expansion patterns worry us. Every computer model shows humans spreading quickly across space, taking over planets and eventually threatening our territories. This makes you dangerous neighbors. A third alien that looked like a huge bug clicked its mouth parts as it spoke. Most concerning is that you cannot be predicted. Other species follow logical patterns and make sense. Humans act on feelings and emotions and what you call hunches. This makes you unsafe to be around. And Sol stepped forward, trying to use all the diplomatic training he had received back on Earth. Please give us a chance to prove that you are wrong about us. We can learn new ways. We can change our behavior. We can show you that humans are able to grow and become better. The purple alien in the center looked at him with what might have been sadness or pity. The decision cannot be changed. You have 30 days to return to your home system. Any human ships found in our space after that will be destroyed without warning. Your species must stay in your local area. Consider this mercy, not punishment. Then the connection was cut off, and the 4 humans found themselves alone in their small transport ship. The silence went on for a long time before anyone could speak. Dr. Sora was the first to find her voice, but it was very quiet. What do we tell everyone on Earth? How do we explain that we were thrown out before we even had a real chance? Spark. Dongmin hit the wall with his fist. They judged us without really knowing who we are. They looked at our worst moments and decided that was everything about us. They did not see all the good things we showed them. Hanzo looked out the window at all the stars stretching away in every direction. The pain of being rejected was real, and it hurt worse than anything he had ever felt, but underneath that pain something else was starting to grow, a feeling of determination that surprised him with how strong it was. We tell Earth exactly what happened, he said to his companions. We tell them that the galaxy thinks we are too dangerous, too unpredictable, too aggressive. To join their group, he turned around to face the others, and they could see something new in his eyes. It was not defeat, it was resolve and anger and something that looked almost like excitement. And then we show them what humans do when someone tells us we cannot do something. We do not just prove them wrong, we do so much better than they ever thought possible. The trip back to Earth would take many months, but Hansol knew that by the time they got home he would have a plan. The Galactic Council had made their first big mistake about humans. They thought that rejecting them would keep them contained and safe. They thought that saying no would make humans give up and stay quiet. Instead, they had just given humanity the greatest motivation their species had ever had, the burning desire to prove everyone wrong. The need to show that they were not just good enough but better than anyone. Expected the determination to build something so amazing that the aliens who rejected them would regret their decision forever as their ship moved through space toward home. Hansel smiled. For the first time since entering the council chamber, the aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to find out how wrong they were.